I recently had a phone call and email exchange with Mike, an approach controller in San Antonio, Texas, and he had some awesome things to share with the pilot community I really wanted to broadcast here on the channel. And of the things he talked about, here were the 6 that really stood out to me that I think we all need to hear. But at the end, I'll share a link to his full email that is very much worth reading. First, he said that ATC wants to talk to you. Now, I think this can be transformational for us to understand because when things get busy, it's really easy for us as pilots to think we're being a nuisance or getting in the way. And sure, there are definitely ways that we can actually become a nuisance, but simply contacting ATC in the first place is not one of them. So in general, he said it makes his job a lot easier if we'll contact them because then he knows what we're doing and he isn't having to guess or route traffic around us, not really knowing what our intentions are. Secondly, he gave me a huge light bulb moment for IFR flying. Now, one of the most difficult air traffic control calls for me during my instrument rating was this. It's when you're getting cleared for the approach. And the reason this was difficult is because it felt like they were throwing everything they could at you. It was like the longest transmission. They'll say, Skyline 6 Delta Foxtrot, you're 3 miles from Jarrett, turn left heading 180, maintain 2000 until established, you're cleared RNAV 15 approach into Addison. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I thought I could remember what you said, and now I'm way too deep into this transmission. I don't even remember points, 3 through 19 or whatever, and it just felt really long, and that was always really overwhelming to me. It eventually got easier, but then the light bulb moment happened here when Mike told me, hey, this is just PTAC. It's the acronym. Now, I know there's a lot of acronyms in aviation, so this is yet another one. But this one makes a ton of sense and helped me really well. He basically said, hey, it's always PTAC. It's always position, turn, altitude, and clearance. And when you think about it this way, it just suddenly made a lot more logical sense to me of what kind of that transmission is. They're telling you your position, which I don't have to read back to them. Yeah, I already know my position. They're giving you a turn to intercept the localizer, the approach course, which, okay, that makes sense. I'm trying to go to the approach. They're giving you an altitude, which you're probably already at, or is the altitude in accordance with the approach. And so that's not usually just kind of a random altitude. There's some relevance to either you or to the approach, so that makes it easier to remember. And then they're giving you a clearance for the approach that you already know you are on. So thinking through it logically makes it so much easier than just trying to straight up memorize everything they said, what was the turn, what was the altitude, what was the approach. No, you probably actually already know all of those things, and when you just understand it logically, it makes it way easier to comprehend. So PTAC, that was a big one for me. Next, he gave me advice about VFR flight following. I thought this was really interesting. He said if you're going to do a pop-up request, meaning that you're already mid-flight and you're asking for flight following, it's more helpful for air traffic control for you to just first call and just start off with your call sign and your position and leave it at that, instead of rattling off your entire request just from out of nowhere, because they're not talking to you, they didn't know to expect you. And requesting VFR flight following can kind of be a long transmission, and then it requires a little back and forth for you to get set up with them. So he just recommends checking in first with your call sign and your position, and then allowing them to ask you for the destination, altitude, and type of aircraft when they have a minute. Now, I can see a counter argument to this where you say, well, hey, rather than just kind of doing a bunch of back and forths to kind of really hang up the radio, can I just give it to them all at once and let them figure it out? Yeah, maybe so, but I really tend to lean towards what Mike is saying here, just because I'm hey, I just want to chime in and then let you guys deal with it, because you might be in the middle of a bunch of stuff that I can't see right now, or maybe you just told everyone to be quiet, I don't know, and I'm checking in with this really long transmission. So, especially if you're in the middle of nowhere and getting flight following is not urgent in the least, just check in with your position and your call sign and let them get back to you when they have time. Mike also told me that center controllers will usually be transmitting on 2 to 6, yeah, you heard me right, 6 different frequencies at the same time. So don't be alarmed if you can hear them but not the responding traffic. But this also means you need to be extra cognizant of when you check in. It's always a good idea to listen for a moment before transmitting on a new frequency, because you don't know if they're right in the middle of something or something really critical, or they might have just told everyone to be quiet for a moment so they can sort things out. I mean, the fact that they're talking on multiple frequencies just makes this all the more important. And I thought that knowing that they can transmit on up to 6, I knew it was probably a couple, but not 6. So that was really eye-opening. And speaking of busy moments, he also told me that ATC has a reputation of talking too fast. So don't feel bad for asking for clarification or just asking for them to slow down if you're having a hard time. I found this pretty refreshing to hear from a controller, because I've often thought, man, could they read that ATIS any faster? Or my clearance, I can't write that fast. How can they even talk that fast? And so it was good to hear him say hey, yeah, we probably talk too fast. So if you need something, just speak up. And I thought it was a good reminder to all of us. Ultimately, they are responsible for trying to communicate well and keep people safe. But we're also responsible as PIC. So if we're not getting what we need from them, it's our job to speak up. I thought it was a good reminder. Oh, and also he said that this can mean asking questions about MOAs, about restricted airspace, about clearances. I mean, it's not just, hey, can you repeat that or slow down? It's about a whole wide range of things. things, because he said it's really better to request clarification or to repeat something rather than just doing the wrong thing because you misunderstood them. So basically, sometimes we forget that we can make requests and ask for help, and really that's what they're there for at the end of the day. He also mentioned that during an emergency, if you're talking to ATC, they'll definitely be there to help, and they'll likely be asking you questions to determine how they can help. But Mike suggested he really wants us to remember that it's a perfectly fine response to just say unable or I'll get back to you in a moment. Basically, sometimes we can operate radio first instead of kind of pilot first, and so I think the old adage is really true, to aviate, navigate, and communicate, but most importantly, in that order. Now, if you'd like to see the full email he sent me, along with all of his other tips, I put a link to that article down in the description. I really think it's worth checking out and seeing which of his tips you can implement today. And if you're looking for more resources of how to get better and more proficient talking to ATC, I put a video together talking about the 15 things that I kind of learned the hard way, frankly, all the mistakes I made flying around here in the Class B airspace for hundreds of hours. And so it's on the screen right now. I'll see you over there.